Good morning, and welcome to VCF Italia. My name is Corey Cohen, and I'm from the Vintage Computer Federation. Some of you may know me already from my work with Apple I and Apple II computers, as well as my work on Selby and Altair systems. You also may know me from the Vintage Computer Federation board. Now, we were asked, because we work so closely with the Vintage Computer Club Italia, to say a few things about the hobby and about what's going on with people who have a passion for vintage computers. Now, I wish I could have been there. In fact, most of our board of directors wishes we could have been there, but we do host a few shows this time of year, and each of us are working on individual shows and couldn't travel at this time. Now, some of you may know about those shows from our VCFed.org website, one of the largest vintage computer websites in the world with the most active members. VCFed.org is a place where you can go and really show your passion for vintage computers. And you can even ask questions there, and amazingly, maybe the person who designed that component or that system might even answer your question. It's not uncommon to have someone from the Commodore 128 team or the Amiga team or even the Apple Lisa team to answer questions as to why something isn't working or why they did something. Now let's talk a little bit about the hobby today. Now, in looking at the state of what people think about vintage computing today versus 10, 15, 20 years ago, here's a perfect analogy. When people talk about Italian machinery, great Italian machinery of the 20th century, you hear things like brand names like Lamborghini and Ferrari and Ducati. But we, the vintage computer community, know that there's a name that should be in that list and might even be the first one in that list, Olivetti. While some people might think a 1965 Ferrari 275 is beautiful, we show passion and get excited about the 1965 Olivetti Programma 101. This is our passion. This is why we're here. Does it make us crazy? Maybe. But at one point, car collectors were thought of as crazy. Who would want a 20-year-old Ferrari? Now look at that hobby. It's all over the place. And we're seeing that with vintage computers. Places like eBay once had 100 or so items every week. Now there are thousands per day. And there are communities everywhere. And each year we have more and more festivals and workshops and people really getting involved in this hobby and really wanting to learn more about the history and the fun of a vintage computer. They just work. And if they don't work, you can fix them. It's not like a modern computer where if it doesn't work, you might as well throw it out. There's not much you can do to fix it. But we can get our hands dirty. We can get inside and we can repair a Commodore 128. We could repair an Altair, a Sinclair. These are things we can do and we get excited about it. And this weekend, you're going to see many different vintage computers and many different vintage computer systems. Hopefully something you've never seen before or never gotten to touch and only have seen it on a photograph. So my wish for you is to enjoy VCF Italia, enjoy the show, join the online communities, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Every one of us started out as a novice in this hobby. Even those who came from, Intel or came from Apple, the first time they picked up something they weren't familiar with, it was very different. And they had to reach out and ask, well, how do I do something? So don't be afraid and touch the machines.